3 years ago, one of our kids was diagnosed autistic. We haven't talked about it publicly yet because we needed time to process it, and quite frankly, all our focus needed to be on supporting and loving our child. I know life is unpredictable, but I never saw this coming. I never anticipated that I might one day experience this amount of pain. I never once thought I'd know such heartache. This is the hardest thing I've ever known. I'm sure you all feel the same. Most people will not understand this yet, but the pain of being a parent to an autistic child is not the child, it's the world. The pain is seeing your child standing on the sidelines, confused, distressed and left out, while the other kids instinctively understand the rules and the social norms. It's watching the world overwhelm them and then holding them through yet another meltdown, knowing they don't want to feel this way, knowing that they're feeling a deep sense of shame, but their body and mind is overwhelmed and out of control. And there is nothing you can do except be there. It's the quiet grief of unspoken words, of watching them struggle to express things that come so easily to others. It's the way people look at you in public when they're crying on the floor or smashing themselves against the wall. Strangers assuming they're badly behaved instead of overstimulated, exhausted, drowning in a world that refuses to slow down for them. And however hard it is for me, I know they're doing it so much tougher.
I don't want to be another person crying on the internet, right? I've written a sensible thing I was going to say, but even just listening to that grab again just makes me want to cry. On Friday, I opened my phone and watched that, and I wasn't alone. What you just heard was the host of the Imperfects podcast and founder of the Resilience Project, Hugh van Cuylenberg, reading an open letter on his podcast, but that was a video that was on social media to parents of kids with autism. And my reaction to it, along with thousands and thousands of others, was a bit of a jagged, snotty exhale. There's been an overwhelming response to Hugh's letter. It's gone viral. The majority of it has been positive, from parents in similar positions saying thank you for articulating our experience, for saying, yes, it is incredibly difficult watching the world react to your child, sometimes with confusion and judgment and cruelty. It is stressful, it's exhausting, learning how to be their best support, how to be their advocate and their protector, as well as their cheerleader, and sometimes their punching bag, both figuratively and literally. And then there's been some pushback from those who resent any implication that neurotypical parents should be centered in a conversation about the neurodiverse, and also from those who feel like expressing the complexity of his feelings about parenting an autistic kid. In doing that, Hugh might be adding to negative perceptions that exist around neurodiverse people in general. The fact that before sharing what was actually a very personal letter, Hugh made sure to let people know that he had consulted with both autistic people and parents of autistic kids. He name-checked Grace Tame, Sarah Hayden, David Hobbs, Claire Willis and Sam Kavanagh, of people who had helped him in preparing his very personal statement. And of course, he also thanked his wife, Penny. They shared something so personal but kept boundaries in places to not identify their child and to be as cautious as possible, I think, to make sure they weren't being seen as owning this whole discussion. And as I say, I don't want to be another person crying on the internet, but as someone who's walked in those shoes and still does, I want to say that I acknowledge all those complexities. But I want to just really strongly assert that Hugh and other parents, because he certainly isn't the first or the only, who talk about this experience, are not trying to be a definitive voice about autism. They're not trying to own a narrative about disability or trying to claim that in some kind of suffering Olympics they have it harder than other parents who are dealing with other really complicated issues or illnesses or disabilities. They're just speaking a truth about a very specific experience of being the parent of a neurodivergent child. And my reaction, as well as thousands of other people's, tell you just how right he got it, because it is painful and it's stressful and it's exhausting, and those things, as Hugh articulated, do not mean that it isn't also an extraordinary privilege, as all parenting is, and a joy, as all parenting is. And nobody picks themselves up and gets on with it more than a parent with a kid who needs them, right? But not being allowed to say those hard parts out loud help nobody, in my opinion. and only add to the stress and pain and anxiety that can actually backfire on kids often. Jessie, do you think that one of the reasons that video got such an enormous response is that Hugh, as well as being very articulate and honest and vulnerable in that, is also a father rather than a mother, and that almost contributes to the impact?
I would ordinarily say that. I think that that women cop more shit on the internet than men do, as a general point. But I actually don't think so. I think that how eloquent he was and insightful and vulnerable about this specific experience, I don't think it mattered whether he was a father or a mother. I think there's something to be said for the time of year that he wrote this letter. It's March. A new school year has meant that a time of great change for kids with autism often can be really, really hard. And I think that there are a lot of parents feeling this. And so that's why it struck a particular chord. I also think that people might have just heard the first 5 or 10 seconds or seen criticism and thought that Hugh was talking about the grief of having a child with autism, full stop. That's actually not what he was saying.
It's not.
What he was saying is a truth that I remember my grandmother talking about, when she was raising a child with an intellectual disability, which is different, but it's the pain of watching how the world treats that child. And my gran told this story of she raised her daughter and then her grandson with an intellectual disability, and sitting on a train, and Simon was quite young at the time, and these schoolboys mocked him, and they did this thing with their mouth where they were mocking how he spoke. And she could see that Simon knew what was happening. That was the pain. The pain was going, I am feeling my child's pain. And as a parent, I think what people want more than anything is to see the world fall in love with your child and for the world to see them. It is one of the greatest joys of your life.
To see them the same way you see
them.
To
see them the same way you see them. And my brother, who is a early childhood educator, and he works with kids with specific needs, says that the look in a parent's face when you see their child who has autism and maybe they're 4 and they're nonverbal and their behaviour is punished in certain circumstances, when their parents see you connect with them and love them, that is one of their greatest joys. And that doesn't happen enough. And for Hugh to say, if all you get out of this is that when you're in the shopping centre on the weekend and you see a child having a tantrum or you see a child reacting in a way that you have an opinion about, you have absolutely no idea, and to treat that child and that parent with compassion, to me, that was the takeaway.
And that is what I took away. I think that the way we learn about other people and the way that we become empathetic is by hearing other people's stories and by other people voicing their experiences. And to me, any attempt or criticism of someone's right to do that or the way that they spoke their truth, and I know we've spoken about how their truth can be a bit of a cliche, but their experience, this idea that there's only one way that you are allowed, it's a real policing or a real controlling of the narrative around, I've noticed particularly around disability, where any diversion from that path of that it is a gift, it is a superpower, we only stay positive, we only talk about the good stuff, you get a lot of blowback if you dare, whether you're a person who is experiencing that neurodiversity or one of their carers. There is a lot of pressure and a lot of pressure to stay silent and not speak about your experience. And I just don't see why speaking about your experience takes anything away from the experience of others. I think that we need to hear from all aspects of the experience around everything in life. We were just talking about the importance of hearing from people on a different political side to you and getting empathy into them. This idea that there can only be one voice is maddening to me. And I feel like I've seen this happen to parents before when they've spoken about their experience of parenting a child with a disability, and they have been shamed and silenced and accused of harming other children with disabilities. I was attacked when I spoke about having ADHD and how I didn't think it was a superpower and I wish I could have given it back. And there were a lot of people were positive, but there was a very vocal aspect of the neurodiverse community who was very angry with me and said that I shouldn't say it and trying to police my speech. And I just think, I think it was a gift what Hugh shared, and it will change the way I look at kids and parents, because I don't have an autistic child and there's not one in my immediate day-to-day life. I wouldn't necessarily recognize those signs.
Yeah, I also think, though, that it's interesting you say that, because this experience is so widespread. This is of my friends that have kids, this is a really significant portion of parents that I know who, and if you sit down at a table with parents, this conversation will come up, and to treat it with this, I saw a comment about radical acceptance and positivity and how learning that their child had this was their greatest gift. And I respect and I'm really happy for that family. But I think that when you layer on how you're meant to feel,
it can become toxic positivity.
Yeah, but,
I don't know, what do you think?
I understand the complexity of it, because I talk to Mia often about ADHD, and one of the things you often say to me, and experts have said this to me, and every professional I've ever seen, they'll say, one of the biggest issues for a lot of kids who grow up with neurodiversity is shame, right? To be seen that their neurodiversity is a problem for other people. It makes other people's lives hard, right? And the reason this is very complex is it does make other people's lives hard. Like you said before, Jessie, that all parents want is for everybody to see how beautiful their kids are. That's true. And your kid is your number one priority. But also, there is nothing wrong. Parents are people. We're just humans, like ordinary humans with finite resources, finite amount of energy, finite
amounts of patience,
and also finite amounts of knowledge about this stuff. The average parent who is given a diagnosis for their kid is not walking around living and breathing what autism means, what ADHD means. So they have to learn. It is difficult for them. It's okay for a parent. I think it needs to be okay for a parent to say, this is exhausting. I am so stressed and I am so lonely and I am so whatever, without being told that they are being negative. However, the problem is you also don't want your kid and other kids with these issues to feel like they are making their parents, teachers, carers, friends' lives hard. So it is a really complicated thing, and I really respect and understand that. And I think that you've already said this, Mia, but the answer is lots of different voices and nobody claiming. It's true that someone like Hugh and someone, like me, I guess, and someone, we have microphones in front of us and have platforms and audiences. And so it's like, well, that experience will get lifted. But I think that this is a very specific experience that, as you said, Jessie, affects a lot of people. But we're just humans. And I think sometimes you're allowed to say this is really fucking difficult.